Welcome, Mindsetters, to another exciting session. As I always say, she always gives me hell about that. But anyway, guys, I hope you're ready for today's session of Learn Extra. So, tell us what's happening today.
I don't know. I'm hoping Belinda, our producer, can organize some food for us and some snacks in between. So learners, you know what? Maybe just let Belinda know that this is important, that we are well fed.
Yes.
But besides that, for the grade 10 learners, we're going to be going through the different skeletons. We're going through the different skeletons. And yeah, it's easy stuff, hey? So as long as you understand it, with a bit of luck, by the end of the session, they'll know it off by heart, and you won't have to learn it at all. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So, Kathy, while you make your way over there, I'm going to tell these guys what they always have to do. So, guys, make sure you get on the page, you know the page, www.facebook.com/learnextra. Get chatting to me. Let me know if you have any problems, if you're lost in it, if you need help. Because if you don't help yourself by putting the question up, we can help you. But for now, I'm going to hand over to Kathy. Kathy, take it away.
Thank you. Okay, learners, please remember, let Ty know if there's anything that you do not understand or you'd like to ask questions about. And I think since we're heading towards the end of the term, the last 10-15 minutes we are going to dedicate purely to any questions you want to ask on all the work that we've done this entire term. So if there's anything that you're battling with, anything you want me to go through again, and I think Ty can also help us, because I mean he's been standing here listening to all of it. So please let us know if there are any issues. All right, so for now, we're looking at support and movement in animals. We're looking at the types of skeletons. So all you have to do is think about what we've done so far. We've spoken about plants, and we sort of say, no, hold on, plants, I mean, hello, plants can't have a skeleton, and we have established that they actually can. Plants do have a skeleton. They are going to have an internal skeleton, and that internal skeleton is created by the xylem and the sclerenchyma. Now, just to recap there, because this is sort of revision as well as we go, with your xylem tissue, what does xylem do? It transports water up the plant. So the water goes from the roots through the stem to where? The leaves. And why do we want it at the leaves? We want it at the leaves for photosynthesis. Okay? And how do we create that? We create it because of a suction force of transpiration, so the water leaving the leaves. All right, but the xylem tissue, remember, if we take a cross-section through a xylem vessel, because remember now there'll be another xylem vessel here, and they're sort of honeycombed structures like this. We know that they have a very thick cell wall, and the cell wall is thickened with a substance called lignin. And lignin is waterproof, and it is very thick. And because it waterproofs the cell walls, there are no cross walls. So that means the xylem vessels end up making long tubes that lie next to each other. They've got little bordered pits, and those little bordered pits allow for movement of water sideways so that the water can be taken to the leaves where we want it, essentially for photosynthesis. All right, but it's this lignin and these very thick cell walls that help with that internal skeleton. And then we also know that with sclerenchyma, there is incredibly thick cell walls, and the contents of the cells are absolutely non-living. So all of that will give us this internal skeleton that plants have. And then, of course, we also just put a little asterisk here and say, remember that the actual cells must be turgid. And when they are turgid, you've got that pressure of the water or the liquid in the cell pushing outwards against the cell wall, and the cell wall pushing back. And when those two are equal, then the cells are turgid, and that in itself gives the plants a support system as well. And as you will know, that when a plant lacks water, because maybe it's dry, you haven't watered the plant, or there's a drought, what happens? The plant will wilt. So that in itself means that its internal structure is now all limp. All right, now, if we look here, we look at internal skeletons, and we say, okay, so that's plants done. We've done that, and you've done a lot of plant tissue and cells and how everything works. We now look at our animals. And the problem is that animals, which is anything that is not a plant, so every structure and organism on this planet, other than viruses, because we don't know where to classify them, remember, if it has a cell wall, it's a plant. And if it doesn't have a cell wall, it falls into the family, into the section, into the kingdom of animals. So, animals, what do they need to do? They need to move around to get their food. Even if it's one cell, it has to move to get food. All right? They also need to look for food, for shelter, and for mates. And if we look at shelter and mates, we're referring clearly to your bigger organisms, all right? So not just your single-celled organisms, but your bigger organisms. Now, the simplest invertebrates. Now, the difference here, and this is very important. Let's just zip down here. You've got vertebrates and invertebrates. Okay, a vertebrate versus an invertebrate. What are these things on our back, down your spine? It's a spinal cord, all right? And it is made up of vertebra, which are the bones that make up our spine. And inside the middle is our spinal cord. So the vertebrae, in other words, those bones, are there to make sure that we protect the cord that runs all the way down and is part of the central nervous system. And this would apply to a monkey, it would apply to a dog, it would apply to a rat, it would apply to a bird and a fish. There is the spinal cord that runs all the way down, which forms part of the central nervous system. So, vertebrates would have a spine. Okay? Invertebrates, there is no spine. And that is your biggest difference. All right? And your vertebrates are, there are 5 groups. You've got your fish, okay, you have amphibians, you have reptiles, birds, and mammals. All right, as far as the animal kingdom is concerned. So within the animal kingdom classification, vertebrates have a spine, and it relates to these 5 groups of organisms. All right, whereas invertebrates are all the rest. So every other kind of organism that you can think of that does not have a cell wall will then be classified into the invertebrate group. So amoeba would be an invertebrate. Hydra would be an invertebrate. Those Portuguese men of war that you see, they have beautiful movie clips in the National Geographic on the Portuguese man of wars. They're like your blue bottles. Jellyfish. All those organisms that don't actually have a skeleton and a spinal cord, they all fall into invertebrates. All right, so now that we understand the difference and what that means, we now go, the simplest invertebrates have specialized cells or tissue that assist them to move and to or away from stimuli. But even your invertebrates have very specialized, and that's what's important, specialized cells and tissues. Now, just as a reminder, we start off with cells. Cells are composed of organelles. So your organelles within a cell membrane and floating around in the cytoplasm. All right, if it's an animal, no cell wall. If it's a plant, it has a cell wall. We go from our cells, and cells specialize and differentiate and form layers, which are our tissue. And layers of tissue form organs, and different organs will form a system. And then we have all the different systems, like the nervous system, the endocrine system, skeletal system, nervous system. All the systems together form us, the organism. All right, so here we're talking about specialized, very specialized cells and tissue that will assist them to move around. So if you've got a single-celled little animal like amoeba, it's going to have within its cell, it is going to have reactors to stimuli that it receives from outside, and it will move. It will move to or away, and it would be regulated by things like things that are favorable or unfavorable, like temperature, pH, etc., would cause it to move towards or away from an area. Okay, and then we have structure, and support in the body is important for movement. Now, if you think of our bodies, think about a baby and a newborn baby. And you take this newborn baby and you try and make it sit. Or you put it onto its stomach and you expect it to crawl around on all fours. It's not going to move. Why? Well, the muscles are there. Everything is there. Why can't it move? Well, it hasn't learned to move yet, and the muscles haven't developed to be able to support it. So as the baby gets a bit older, the baby will start to be able to sit, and babies will be taken and they'll be propped up against cushions, and they'll sit there and they do this. And as they do this, and this, by the way, is relevant to the matrics, to the grade 12s who are watching, they start to coordinate via the central nervous system. They start to coordinate their balance. And it's that balance of the structure, this internal structure, which is the balance is created by our muscles, and that will allow the baby to learn to sit. And once it can sit, it will now start to learn to walk. All of it is all control of the structure. Now, that structure, that's when we talk about structure, and we talk about support and being able to move. All right, if we look here at the types of skeletons, we start off with the first one. And the first one I've marked as A is the hydrostatic skeleton. Now look at the word. Whenever you get a word in life science, and this applies to any subject, geography, history, maths, accounting, and science, if you get a word, look at what the word is made up of. All right, and then you'll get a very good idea of sort of what it means without having to look at a dictionary. Otherwise, take your phones and look it up on Google. Or you can come to Mindset Extra or Learn Extra and you can look it up there. But in the meantime, this is how you do it. You break the word up. Okay, so hydro literally means water. Everything to do with water will be hydro. We have hydroelectricity, hydro this, hydro that. Okay, a hydro spa, which us girls like, is you go to the spa and you pampered in water, basically. Static, hydrostatic, static would be within a place. Okay, it's static, it doesn't move around. Skeleton. So, how do we get that hydrostatic skeleton? So it's a water-based skeleton. We have fluid, which makes up the skeleton. That's why it's called hydro. And it fills a cavity in the center of an animal, and that cavity would be called a xylem. Okay, so now think. It's fluid in a C for cavity, and that's why we call that cavity a xylem. All right. You can pronounce it coulomb. I don't actually hassle about how you pronounce it as long as you can spell it. English is a very difficult language, actually. It's where you put the emphasis on words, and C's are pronounced S's, and S's are pronounced something else, and K's and C's and blah, blah, blah. Just know how to spell the word. All right, and anyone will forgive you for the way you pronounce it. So, it's pronounced Xylem, but it's spelled C-O-E-L-O-M. And it is a cavity that is filled with liquid. And that liquid makes up a fluid or a liquid skeleton. Okay, now, enclosed by muscles of the body wall. So, you've literally got this little cavity, which is the Xylem. And the Xylem is then surrounded by muscles that are circular muscles and longitudinal muscles, or the other way around, depending on which organism it is. And then you've got all the other layers. But you've got these muscles. And as the muscles contract and relax, the fluid is pushed forwards or backwards. And it's that pushing of the fluid forward and backwards that allows movement to this organism. And it'll all fall into place as you look at what organisms have hydrostatic skeletons. So, with this fluid, it presses against the muscles as they contract. And when they contract, they're going to be squeezing on this liquid. And that will then cause pressure. All right. So, think of a balloon. And we fill the balloon with the balloon structure with water. All right. And then knot it. All right, so now we've got water inside here. If we take our hands and we squeeze, we're going to push that liquid sideways, and that liquid's going to be under more pressure than it was if we let go. And that's literally what the muscles do. Xylem with liquid, and you've got the muscles contracting and relaxing on either side. Okay? So, the combination of the pressure of the fluid and the contraction of the muscles, which is causing the pressure on the fluid, that's what helps this organism to have maintained shape. Okay, and it allows it to move. Why? Because that shape is maintained by the pressure, which is created by the contracting and the relaxing of muscles. It would be a simple thing if this was a long balloon filled with liquid, and I push here, it's going to bulge this side. So I release my hand here. And if I push this side's going to have to relax because all the liquid's going to go this side. And that in itself will create movement. All right. If the body is segmented, and this is very important, if the body is segmented, so you know a segment would be within an animal, there would be segment 1 and segment 2 and segment 3, and all of this would then eventually make up this little organism. All right? Okay, if it's segmented, the pressure of the fluid is localized. In other words, the pressure will be within each little segment. Okay, and that's how it is going to be working. Now, try and think, close your eyes, and think of an organism that is an animal, okay, it's classified as an animal, that you know, or that you can think of, that works with a skeleton of water inside its body. And I can give you a clue. We find them in our garden, all right? So think about it, and I can see the light bulbs coming on. And there we go, an earthworm.
Kathy,
Yes.
do you think before we go into the next part, we should take a little bit of an ad break so we can give them a bit of a break so they can put everything together?
Cool. Can I just finish the little earthworm thingy?
No problem.
All right, people. So here you have your earthworm. And if you have a very careful look here, gosh, I hope you're going to be able to see this. There are segments everywhere here. And what happens is this earthworm is able to move because of the pressure created by the muscles in those segments. So if it needs to move forward, a whole bunch of muscles will contract and the earthworm's going to go short and fat. So all that liquid that's in there is going to be compressed, but instead of being long and narrow, it's going to go short and fat. And then when it wants to push forward, the muscles will now, but the longitudinal muscles are going to pull. And what's going to happen? The circular muscles will contract, the longitudinal muscles will relax, and it will make the earthworm's body long and thin. And with that, it will move forward. So that is how movement is created, and because of the pressure of the liquid in the coelom, the C-O-E-L-O-M, okay, in the coelom, which is surrounded by longitudinal and circular muscles. And with that tie, I think, let's take a break.
All right, so guys, I hope you had a nice little session now. Guys, make sure you always have your pens, pads, and writing notes. It's so important, so important. But for now, we're going to see you after this break. Welcome back, Mindsetters. I hope you had a nice little break. You got yourself some snacks so you don't have to keep getting up and going to the bathroom. But before we continue with the lesson, I have two questions that I needed to ask quickly. Sanele wanted to find out what's the difference between the tibia and the fibula.
Okay. Sanele, where are your toes? Your toes are down the bottom there. And toes start with a T, and tibia starts with a T. So the tibia is always in line with your big toe. Okay, and the fibula is what's left over. Okay, remember it that way. So femur, all right? That's why guys like girls with long legs. Femur.
All femur.
And that's why it's called femur, because think femur, female. Us girls, we have lovely long femurs. So femur. And then your tibia is always in line with your big toe. They both start with T. And the fibula is on the outside. Okay, the fibula is this bone along there. Okay, and then the other one is the radius and the ulna.
Yes.
Okay, you can rotate your thumb, but your pinky is the useless one. Okay, what do we really do with our pinkies? Think. I mean, even when you're driving a mouse on a computer, the little pinky's up here. If you drink tea like the Queen, your pinky's up here. If you're a girl and if you drink a beer, you drink it gracefully with your pinky up here. Pinkies are useless. Okay? And your thumb can rotate. Having said that, the radius is always in line with the thumb because the thumb can rotate. And the pinky is useless, ulna. So the ulna with a U is in line with your useless pinky. Although I know that if you lose your pinky, I think it would be quite horrible. But yeah,
but
I think then you'd realize, but I mean, you can still do a whole bunch of things without the pinky. So useless pinky, ulna, rotating thumb, radius. Radius, ulna, tibia on the side of the big toe, and the fibula is on the other side. There we go.
Right.
Anything else?
That was about it for now.
Cool. All right. People, pay attention. You're looking at least 12 marks here. If I was questioning you, this would be a 12-mark question. And it covers this entire section. So easy, quick marks, and let's do it. All right. Advantages. What are the advantages that we are going to have of a hydrostatic skeleton? And I want you to, when you think of a hydrostatic skeleton in your brain, think of an earthworm, think of a jellyfish, think of things that are mushy. All right? So it allows it's not rigid. Not like ours. This is rigid. This is hard. It's not rigid, which means they can squeeze in anywhere. Why? Because they are very flexible. This is easy to remember. And also, the fluid stimulates circulation. Because remember, as this fluid is whooshing around inside this little organism, it's increasing the whole circulation process because it's helping things to move along. So, you must know generally 2 advantages and 2 disadvantages. Think of 3 because then you've always got one that, just in case you don't remember, you can fall onto it. So it's not rigid, it's mushy, it's very flexible because you can squeeze through very small holes, and you've got circulation is being stimulated all the time. If we look at the disadvantages, there are only 2 that I could think about quickly and offhand, but dehydration, because listen, if the entire internal skeleton is made of water, I mean, logic tells you that if this thing becomes dehydrated, hello, what do you think is going to happen to the liquid inside? It's going to get all mushy and then it's going to go all limp. All right, it won't be able to function. And if you've ever seen an earthworm on your lawn after it's rained and then the sun comes out and bakes the thing because it's now drowned, what happens? It goes all and flat and mushy. The same with blue bottles that wash up onto the beach. After a couple of days, when you go in, there's no liquid inside them, and you can walk and you stomp on them, and then they burst and they make a noise, and that's what we used to do as kids. Great fun. But anyway, they were dead. So dehydration, and that's a big problem because the minute it starts to dehydrate, it's not going to be able to move because it's going to lose shape. And it also doesn't provide protection for any internal organs. Look at us. Here, in this rib cage, what have we got? Full protection of the important things like our lungs and our heart and the liver all sit here nicely cushioned and protected by the ribs, or the liver sits just outside. Okay? And here, what's in here? It's the most important thing to your body, and it is your brain. And what is it protected by? This hard thing here. So that would be your skeleton, or the skeleton we have. Here, it can't protect anything because it's just made of water. And if this thing dehydrates, it's dead. It can't move. All right, so easy. And what I would suggest here is draw columns. And then what you do is you say advantage, what it is, advantages, disadvantages. And then you write hydrostatic skeleton, and then external skeleton and internal skeleton. And you learn that as a table. Take it, stick it up on the fridge door, so you can't take anything out of the fridge until you've read it through the whole table, or behind the toilet door, or next to the mirror where you do your beautifications every day. That's what you do. Or on your bedroom cupboard door, before you take any clothes out of your cupboard, read through the table. It's a definite, very nice question. And you must remember, it also makes it very easy for teachers to mark. So they give you a table, or they ask you to tabulate. It's wonderfully easy to mark. On the eyes for the teacher, there can't be any nonsense. It's straight facts. Alrighty, here we go on our second one, which is our second type is an exoskeleton. So we've done our water skeleton. Now we're doing exo. And exo means outside. Okay? So it's an outside skeleton as a direct translation from biological terms into normal speak. Okay? Endoskeleton would be an internal skeleton. Exo is always on the outside. So what do we have? It's when they have a hard outer shell, like, for example, your insects. Now, if you think of a honeybee, a bumblebee, a locust, where's the soft part? Only in the abdomen. But the main structure, the head and the thorax, they are all hard. And if you stand on them, that's what makes the crunching sound. Okay? Sorry, I'm not very partial to insects, but here we go. So they have a hard outer shell. Now, the skeleton is made up of a substance called, and this is important, chitin. Okay? Where hydrostatic was water, this is chitin. And it is a substance that's secreted by the epidermis. Now, this chitin is mainly protein, and it makes a really nice hard skeleton. All right? The head and the thorax are made up of the exoskeleton. All right? The abdomen, which is the long part at the back, is soft, and it's attached to the thorax. So you have the head, you have the thorax. They're made of chitin, and that's the important stuff that has to be protected. And then you've got this big mushy thing at the back here. And if it's a bee, well, then it's got red and, black and yellow little stripes. So this can be our little bee with its little sting over there. Okay, not very good on. Okay, so there would be your, and it's got to have wings. Okay, head, thorax is made up of the chitin, the exoskeleton, and the abdomen is just the soft part, but it's attached here to the thorax. The wings are attached to the thorax. The legs are attached to the thorax. So anything that's going to be moving and anything that's important and that helps this thing to survive is going to be here in the head and in the thorax, which is protected by the exoskeleton. Now, the exoskeleton acts as a hard outer covering, okay? And what does it do? It helps this organism to survive. All right, it's an adaptation, and it's made up of a series of plates or tubes that all fit in and around and make this organism viable. Now, if we look at the this is a dragonfly. I love dragonflies because they symbolize that they're so symbolic. But there you've got your dragonfly. Look at the beautiful colors. There's the head. And you're not going to be able to see that, so let's get another color here. So you've got the head. All right. You have the thorax, which is where the wings are attached here. And then you've got the abdomen. But even the abdomen looks like it's got plates around it, but you've got the legs and the wings. What are they attached to? They're attached to the thorax. Okay, advantages and disadvantages. So can you see what you need to do? You need to know the 3 types of skeletons, what they are, okay, advantages, 2 advantages, 2 disadvantages. And if you know that, I promise you now you're A for away, you're safe. All right, advantages of an exoskeleton, okay, are going to be, it forms a point of attachment. Let's get my color here. A point of attachment of the internal muscles needed for locomotion and flight. It forms support and protection to all the delicate parts or the important parts in the in the head and the thorax. It prevents, now look at this, desiccation. And if desiccation is too difficult for you, remember desiccation means drying out. Okay, so this exoskeleton will help that organism to survive when things are very, very dry and unfavorable. So that is why insects are found in just about any and every part of this universe, on this planet. Why? Because they can survive everywhere, because they don't have to worry about drying out. And it's the exoskeleton that protects everything. And also, look at this, and this is very important. Most insects that you know are able to fly. And if they are going to fly, they must have very little weight. You can't have this little insect weighing 1 kilogram trying to fly up and do its thing. It's very, very difficult. So it has the exoskeleton, even though it's thick and it's hardy and it's made of chitin and it's so protective and blah, 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 it has a low density. So therefore it's light, and it makes sure that flight can take place, so the little insect can fly and move around. If we look at the disadvantages, the body size is going to be limited because you've got the solid head, the solid abdomen, and it's got to be low density. It can't be huge. You don't see big insects. Insects are all small. All right, and remember, spiders are not insects. Insects, if you count their legs, will always only ever have 3 pairs of legs. If they've got 3 pairs of legs, then it's an insect. All right, so the final body size is limited. Why? Because the body increases, you're going to end up with your surface area volume ratio is going to decrease, and you don't want that. So it limits the body size. Growth is restricted. Because remember, it can only grow to the size of the exoskeleton. So that means that every time this little animal, creature, insect, has to grow, it has to get to a period, and then it literally tears out of its old exoskeleton, and it waits until the bottom exoskeleton dries. Because remember, it's wet and mushy. And it first has to dry, and when it's dry, well, now it can reach that next size. But in the meantime, from the time that the old skeleton bursts and tears off, and the new skeleton dries, that little insect can't move. And if it can't move, it can't get away, which means it can be eaten. And that's it. It's as simple as that. It is very, 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 it's at a huge disadvantage because it can do nothing. So it's very vulnerable when it's molting, and it has to watch out for its predators. Why? Because it's got to wait for that exoskeleton to dry. And it also means that this happens in stages in the life of the adult insect. Okay, or no, not really the adult, in the insect's life. All right, and it's generally from when you have your, whether it's metamorphosis or complete metamorphosis. An incomplete metamorphosis, you're going to have egg, larva, pupa, adult, or you're going to have egg, larva, adult. All right, now in the case of a locust, it would be incomplete metamorphosis, so it would be egg, larva, or nymph, which is a larva, and then adult. And what happens is it's going to molt 6 times. I think there's a difference between some of the different species, but you're looking at about 6 times that it will molt, which means 6 times that exoskeleton is going to be shed, and while that old one's being shed off, the new one underneath has to dry, and that poor little thing is then vulnerable, and that's when they get zapped. All right, so final body size is limited, growth is restricted, and they are very, very vulnerable when they are molting. And we call it molting when the exoskeleton comes off, the old one, and the new one forms underneath. Okay, I'm going to just start endoskeleton, I think, and then we'll take a short little break. So here we go. If we look at an endoskeleton, which is, think of us. Okay. Think of us. So hydrostatic skeleton, think of an earthworm. Exoskeleton, think of a bee or a dragonfly. And endoskeleton, think of us, or a dog or a cat. We have an endoskeleton. Our skeleton is inside, and it's covered with muscles, and those muscles allow us to control our skeleton and move. So skeleton is inside because that's what endo means in life sciences. Endo is inside, exo is outside. So inside the body and consists of bones if we are vertebrates, or cartilage in the case of, for example, sharks. Sharks have an endoskeleton, all right, and they're classified as vertebrates, but they have a cartilaginous skeleton. So their skeleton is far more pliable and movable than ours is. I mean, just take your nose, and you can wiggle your nose around. You can wiggle your ears around. This is all cartilage. Okay, so I think we'll stop there before we go on to the advantages and disadvantages. In the meantime, while we take our break, you think of the advantages and disadvantages of having our kind of skeleton. Okay, Ty?
All right, so guys, while you're trying to figure out that part of your skeleton, because I would also want, I'm dying to find out what you guys also think. So guys, make sure you stick around after this break, because we'll be right back. See you soon. Welcome back, Mindsetters. I hope you had a nice little break. You got yourself some snacks. You got something that you can nibble on so you don't have to keep going up to the kitchen or going to the bathroom, whatever you have to do so you can pay attention. But quickly, before we start again in this next session, I have a question that I need to ask Kathy quick. So, Kia Bako?
Excuse me?
I'm trying.
Excuse me.
I'm trying.
I should be battling, not you.
I'm trying.
You'll have to forgive him. He's so gorgeous. We have to just pluck. Doesn't matter.
Anyway, she wanted to find out, what type of skeleton does a snake have?
Listen, hun, let me tell you a story. In the Karoo, especially, where there are quite a lot of snakes floating around, and in fact it applies to any place, any farms, if a snake is found or killed, dead, or it is killed, they take the snake and they put it over a fence. so that it dries and it rots and it gets eaten and it breaks down and the decomposers break it down, so that what's left over is this skeleton of bones hanging over the fence. All right, and then the bones will just break and they'll fall in that spot at the fence, which means nothing can walk on them and cut themselves and then get poisoned. Okay, and it's not poison from the snake poison, but it's poison from the bones. It would be like standing on a nail. So it's the skeleton. It is a vertebrate. Why? Because snakes are classified in the reptile phylum. Okay, grouping. It goes into the reptile grouping. Right.
And then Coquette's wanted to find...
I've got a picture here, which a slide just now, which I'll show them.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
All the different types of reptile skeletons.
All right, awesome. Coquette's wanted to find out, but if bones are low density, why is it in some slim people weigh more?
No. Listen, doll, I didn't say bones are low density. It was the chitinous exoskeleton of insects. Okay, so it's the insect exoskeleton that is low density. Right. Why? Because most insects fly, and we want them to have low density. All right. It's not our bones. Our bones are not low density, but just to help you right, you sort of are on the right track in that. Sweet Pea here and me, I'm maybe a bit taller than him, but I can guarantee you now that if we were to take our body weights and weigh ourselves on a scale, we probably would be pretty much the same weight. And if I was this short, he would weigh more than me. You know why? And even if I looked fatter, why? Because he's male. Why? Because males tend to hold calcium in their bones. That's why very few males have osteoporosis. Us girls, we get osteoporosis. Why? Because our body has to be able to take calcium from wherever to feed a baby whose body is growing, or an embryo that's growing inside us. So we don't store calcium, we battle to store calcium. That's why it's so dangerous. And ladies, you sitting out there, start taking calcium supplements now, because the calcium you have taken up until about 25, that is what the base of your skeleton is. All right, so to have a healthy skeleton, lots of calcium. Guys, don't release calcium, they store it. That's why their bones generally are heavier than ours. Okay.
All right, and I think that's it for now.
Happy?
Right,
cool.
Awesome.
Okay, endoskeletons, think of us. All right, or your dog or your cat, but if we have to do us, so think of the endoskeleton. Here we go. It's inside. It's made of vertebrates, at least of bone or cartilage. Okay, and what are the advantages? Now, it consists of living tissue, because guys, we've done the tissue, we've done animal tissue, and you know what bone tissue looks like. You know what those bone cells look like. You know that you've got the osteocytes, you've got the Havasian canals, you've got the caniculi. We've done all of this. It's living tissue, all right, and it's able to grow steadily. The skeleton is jointed. Now, if it's jointed, it means we can move. I mean, can you imagine if our hand was like this and all these bones were like all solid? We would not be able to do anything, but it is jointed, all right? The muscles attach directly to the bones, and that helps with support. And our vital organs, look, where are they? Where are our vital organs? They sit here, they're protected by the pelvic bones, all right, and the sacrum, which is this big solid structure, which is basically your bum bone, okay. The spinal cord has the vertebra all around it to protect it. We've got the rib cage here for the heart and the lungs and all the really sensitive tissue. It sits here. We've got the false ribs and down here. I mean, we've got all, and floating ribs. We've got, and then majorly our pelvic area, this pelvic structure here. So all our vital organs are protected, and that's really important. So let's look at it. First of all, let's just take this up again. It's made of living tissue, so it grows steadily. It's not like the exoskeleton, which is made of chitin, and that's it. That's the solid structure. And this poor thing now has to molt and throw off that skeleton and then let the next skeleton dry out and form. So there is no restricted growth, and it's living tissue. It's not just a substance like chitin. The skeleton is jointed. The muscles can attach directly to that skeleton so that we are able to move. And the vital organs, this is very important, is protected. But if you look at the hydrostatic skeleton, internal organs are not, or the vital organs are not protected. But with an exoskeleton, they are. So it will be a negative for hydro, but a positive for endo and a positive for the exoskeleton as well. But if we look at the disadvantages, we're not going to dry out. So drying out doesn't matter, or desiccation doesn't matter, like with hydro. And what we have here is only really one disadvantage, and that is the minute we have a lack of those mineral elements, like we need calcium, and you know this, and phosphates, which is what we make bone of. And if we don't have calcium and phosphates, we end up with brittle bones. All right, and if we have brittle bones, they will break, and we end up with osteoporosis. We end up with osteoporosis. All right, so that's very important. If we break a bone, we won't be able to move as effectively, okay, especially if it's in our arms and in our legs. All right, so that's something that would be negative, but really if everything's working, the only thing is a lack of calcium and phosphates, and you have learned organic compounds and nutrients. Ty, any other questions there so far?
So far, nothing yet,
Cool.
but I am scanning for them. Because
Cool.
we have a lot to go through, I'm going to save them up, so I think that would be the best idea.
Our monitor says about 10 minutes, hey, that we've still got.
So do you want to tackle a couple now, or do you want to give it a little bit?
I think we may have less, so let's quickly get through these pictures.
All right.
Your endoskeleton here is of a swordfish. Okay, it's a bony skeleton. Can you see all of this is bone? And even that pointed end here of the swordfish is made of bone. Alrighty, then we've got more endoskeletons here. Who was it that wanted to know about a snake and what kind of skeleton a snake had?
That was, hold on, let me scan for it. The
Okay,
page is filling
well,
up.
here you go, hun. If you have a look here, here is a snake. All right, here's
Kiabaka.
who was it?
Kiaubaka.
Kyobaka. So what we've got, okay, I can actually use the white. This here is of a snake. Just your normal snake. It's a nice big fatty. And this here would be your python or a boa. I mean, you can't really see. I don't know enough about reptiles to tell the difference whether there's a python or a boa, but it's a damn big thing. Okay? And here's a little turtle, and there's a little tortoise. All right, and you can see it. I mean, this little turtle looks ever so cute because look how long its neck actually looks when you see it just with bones around it. And there's your little fat tortoise. So these would be your reptiles. And here's an endoskeleton of a starfish. Isn't that awesome? And here is a shark. Now remember, the shark is going to be cartilage. Okay, and I think, people, that's about it. And then we start the human skeleton, and the human skeleton is what we are leaving for next week. So, Kai, what else have they given us here?
Well, Teresa wanted to find out why does skeletal striated muscle tissue have many nuclei?
Because if you're looking at striated muscle, remember you've got three types. You've got cardiac muscle, it's just your heart. Smooth muscle, which makes up all your organs. And then your striated muscle is for here, to move your skeleton. And you're using a hell of a lot of energy. And where do you get your energy from? From mitochondria. And the mitochondria will then make lots and lots and lots of ATP. And the ATP is the energy we use to move our muscles.
All right.
So there we go. So striated muscles, lots and lots of mitochondria. Why? A mitochondria is the powerhouse of a cell. Okay, it makes that energy. It takes those glucose and it takes oxygen and it breaks it down into carbon dioxide, water, and energy, ATP.
Right. And on that note, guys, I'm going to sign off and say see you next week. Grade 11s, tune in.
Cheers, guys.